Okay, welcome everyone to our info session for publishing. Thank you all for joining, and we'll get started shortly. My name is Mushar Chaudhry, and I'm the manager of recruitment and sales for the Chang School. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the land on which Toronto Metropolitan University is built upon. Toronto is in the Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Thank the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island for their efforts to protect the land, and I deeply regret the past injustices that they've endured. As Toronto Metropolitan University seeks to move forward in partnership with Indigenous peoples, I pledge to foster an environment that is more inclusive and welcoming of Indigenous peoples from all communities. Now, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's session. Your microphone is muted throughout the event so as not to disturb other attendees or the speakers. For the hearing impaired, we have automated captioning available, which you can access by activating it in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. You can submit your questions for today's speakers at any time by typing them into the question box in the control panel, and we'll collect them throughout the session and address them at the end of the presentation. Now I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. Joining us are Kelvin Kong, academic coordinator for the certificate at the Chang School, Julia Harmsworth, the current student of the certificate, and Lee Nash, publisher at Assembly Press. Now, before we invite Kelvin to do a quick overview and present the certificate, we wanted to do a quick poll and just get our gears moving. So yeah, just wanted to see, what motivated you to consider this certificate. The options are career change, career advancement, skill building for current role, and personal interest. We always get some personal interest in publishing, so it's good to see. We'll leave that up for just a couple of seconds and then we'll share the results. But thank you everyone for participating. So it looks like career advancement and career change are leading. I'm going to go ahead and share the poll. So yeah, career advancement and career change leading the way, and then we've got personal interest and skill building right behind. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Now I will introduce and invite Kelvin Kong. In addition to being academic coordinator and instructor for the certificate, Kelvin is also a production editor at the Chang School, and he'll be giving us a brief overview of the certificate and how it can help you develop the skills you need to advance in publishing, if you like. Welcome, Kelvin.
Great, thanks, Mishra. Can you hear me? Is my voice okay? Everyone nod? Perfect. So a little bit about our program, a little bit of the basics. So the publishing program at the Chang School is a part-time program. So it's designed to be as flexible as possible for you and your priorities. So if you have a full-time job or a caregiving priorities, you can take our courses and not and not have to commit to a full-time course load. You can take as many or as few courses as you like per term. In addition to that, because it's a part-time program, we do also have many students coming in who are in the industry or who are already in publishing to add some skills to their skill set, which, and I'm speaking to this because I'm seeing when I saw the poll, career advancement and career change, our program does fit both those needs as well as, leveling up your skills. So yeah, you can, like I said, you can join for the full certificate and take all the courses, or you can come in and dip in and take one or two editorial courses, or maybe, if you're in publicity, take a course in sales and marketing, really round out those skills. The possibilities are endless. So yeah, but About our program, so it's a part-time program. There is no applications process. So with other programs, you have to apply and get approved to enter. You do not have to do that here. All you need to do is sign up for courses. And if you feel like completing the certificate, register to complete the certificate when you enroll in your courses. Okay, so yeah, the main method of delivery for our program is online and asynchronous. That means that you are not expected, as you know, in our courses, to be at your desks at a certain time and a certain day. You don't have to do that. Each of our classes in a course is an entire week, and you can do the material at your own pace. The main method of delivery is text. So instead of listening to a live video lecture, you'll be reading instead. You'll be interacting with quizzes and whatnot in our content management system, and you'll be interacting with your classmates on the discussion board. So everything is asynchronous. You can really, tackle each week's material at your own pace. Okay, and pardon me, I'm just looking at my notes to see if there's anything I missed. Oh yeah, so our courses run 3 times a year. There are 3 terms at TMU. Winter, which is January to April, spring, summer, which is May to August, and fall, which is September to December. We run courses all year round. And some of the major core courses, like the overview foundational courses, which I'll talk about later, or some of the copy editing courses, those run all 3 terms. So, you can take them whenever. Another detail, in terms of payment, you pay for the courses that you take. You don't have to pay any other ancillary fees. You only pay for what you're taking. Some courses have textbooks. Most of them don't. The editing courses mainly do. Okay. So yeah, for the certificate requirements, it's 6 39-hour courses. There are 2 required and 4 electives. I'll get into those more a little later. And the time span you have if you decide to complete the certificate is a maximum 4-year time span. So you have 4 years. That's about, oh God, my math is bad, 12 terms to complete all 6 credits. Usually we find that most of our students complete it within 1 or 2 years. It really depends on you and your workload. This is, after all, designed to be as flexible for you as possible. And there are also like cases where students will, take more than 4 years because, life gets in the way. And that's also a possibility. And if that happens, you just talk to me and we'll get it sorted. In terms of costs, it's about $7,400 to $8,200. We give a number range because you could take any combination of full and half credits, and I'll explain that, in the next slide. But that is how much you should expect to pay for the courses alone. Again, there may be a couple of textbooks here and there, but not many of your courses will have textbooks that are required. Next slide, please. Okay, so getting on with the certificate requirements, as I said, there are a total of 6 full credits that you have to earn. Two of them will be 39-hour foundational courses or overview courses. One of them, CDPB 100, is the trade overview, where you will learn all about the publishing industry and how it works and the major players and what bookstores are. But if you don't know what bookstores are, you may be in trouble here. Basically, a good overview of what the industry is and how it works. The second foundational course is CDPB 101, which is the business of book publishing. You'll learn about how publishing works as a business because it's not all about, editing and acquiring books and going to parties. Publishing is a business, and you'll learn all about that in the course. So after you complete those 2 overview foundational courses, you will have to complete 4 electives, and they can be anything you want. It depends, when you take the first 2 courses, maybe you'll have decided what direction you want to head in. So for example, you may want to get into editing, in which case you can take a copy at, a bunch of take all the editing courses that we offer. Or if you want to work in publicity, you can take sales and marketing and publicity and whatnot. So yeah, it's world's your oyster. One note, there are 2 types of courses that we offer. We offer full credit courses, which are 39-hour courses. And we also offer half credit courses, which are 19.5 hours. 2 of them add up to be a full credit, and those are usually more specialized courses. things like indexing and I believe proofreading, digital accessibility, audiobooks and whatnot. So you can take any combination as long as they add up to 6 credits. And there's a cumulative grade point average of 1.67, but I'll tell you a little secret. No one in publishing, when you're applying for jobs, will ask you for your marks in your class. So, but please do well. All right, next slide, please. Great. Here I want to talk about some of the some of the courses that we developed in response to industry trends. The biggest trends right now are audiobooks and accessibility. So we have courses on both. We have CDPB 280, which is all about audiobook publishing and production. It's in that course, you'll learn how to produce an audiobook from working on files to acquiring talent and recording. CDPB 285, Accessible Publishing and Production, is a course I think everyone should take. It's a course to learn about how to make publishing more accessible. It's really for editors, but people who work in digital publishing will also find it incredibly useful. And then we have CDPB 803, Digital Publishing and Production, because digital publishing has been a trend since 2011. So when you first learn about publishing, you think everything's a printed book, but no, there are things like ebooks and audiobooks, and you'll learn all about the wonderful world of ebooks and how to make them in 803. Okay, and also I should add our courses are developed with industry experts and leaders. So for example, CDPB 285 and CDPB 803, they're taught by someone named Laura Brady, who is an internationally recognized expert on digital production and accessibility. So if you take, in our program, you will meet and learn with industry leaders. Next slide, please. Great. So here's an overview of the courses that we offer, the types of courses that we offer. As you can see, there are many editing courses. In terms of the schools, the publishing schools that are out there in Canada, we have the widest and most specific range of editing courses. So we have a copy editing course. We have two copy editing courses. We have a substantive editing course, which is more about, story and plot, whereas copy editing is about spelling and consistency. We have a sales, marketing, and publicity courses. We have courses in book production, both print and digital. We have a course on book design. We have the business of book publishing, which, as I mentioned, is a foundational course that you'll be expected to take. You'll have a course on literary rights management, which I teach, and it's all about, being an agent and all the fun stuff. I personally think being an agent is the most glorious part of publishing, but, no one else thinks that. So take my course and you'll see what I mean. There's courses on children's publishing, from marketing to editing. There's a course on editing recipes and cookbooks if you want to head in that direction. There's a course, as I mentioned earlier, on digital publishing, a course on accessibility and audiobooks, which I've also mentioned. But there's also courses on indexing and proofreading. It's very interesting. Indexing is something that no one really thinks about, but it is very important and it's very well paid because very few people want to do it. So if you find that's your speed, you can make a lot of money. Go on, please. Oh, right. Also, I should mention that given our range of courses, we do have a number, and as I mentioned earlier, we do have a lot of people coming into our program for professional development. But we also have students coming in from the other schools who wish to specialize in a given area, and they'll graduate from their program and then come into our program and take more courses towards what they want to do. So that's also another option. Next slide. So career path options, you can work in book publishing. I mean, I assume that's mostly what you're here for. You can work in trade publishing, which is, the stuff that you see in the bookstores. You can work in educational publishing, which is textbooks. You can work in scholarly and academic publishing and reference publishing. So those are more academic works like monographs and university presses and whatnot. So we teach you skills to enter any of those fields. You can also get into freelance editing. a number of our students graduate and go in that direction. Freelance editing being that you don't work for a specific publishing house, you take on editorial projects on a freelance basis from any sort of author or any sort of organization or author. Um, a lot of people I know do it as a full-time job, but others can do it as a side job as well to make a little extra income on the side. Um, you can also get into corporate publishing, and by that I mean like at banks when they publish annual reports, they need people to edit it. So I know a number of former publishers who went in that direction and have made great careers out of it. And finally, there's nonprofit and government communications. The skills that you learn in this program will work towards any communications jobs that you may find. And the roles that we teach you, you can work in business, which is a nebulous term. You can be a publisher like Lee and learn, work on P&Ls and grants. And she'll talk more about that because I'm completely flailing. You can work in editorial like Julia. There's a number of different editorial positions that are in publishing. You can work in sales, marketing, and publicity. You can work in production and design. You can work in rights management. Again, we teach a wide we have a wide range of courses and we give you the skills depending on where you want to go. All right, next slide. Oh, look, it's the end. So yeah, if you have any questions, you can reach Meshroy and me at the email addresses at the bottom there, and I believe you will probably be given a link to the publishing website.
Yep.
Where you will be able to find more information on the program, and you'll also be able to see the course descriptions for each course, including what the tuition is, when it's offered and next offered, but also the sample course outline. So you'll see what you're tackling each week in the 13 or 7 weeks. So yeah, thank you for listening to my spiel. I will give the floor over to the others now.
Thank you so much, Kelvin. That was amazing. Very comprehensive and insightful presentation, but also, you let everybody know about just taking a few courses if they want, right? I call it snacking, getting an appetizer instead of the whole course. That's always a good way to dip your feet into publishing. Well, now it's my pleasure to introduce Lee Nash. Lee is a publisher at Assembly Press, as well as the program advisory lead for the certificate here at the Chang School. Thank you. Welcome, Lee.
Hi, thanks for having me. Nice to see. I feel like we're in a game of Hollywood Squares here. It's fun. So I'm, as introduced, the publisher of Assembly Press. I've also worked as the publisher at House of Anansi Press and Invisible Publishing, and I've worked for Coach House Books and a number of other small publishers as well. I've been involved in the industry for a long time. I'm not going to date myself, but I've sat on the boards of directors for eBound Canada, so that's the digital publishing side of things related to what Kelvin mentioned, and the Association of Canadian Publishers. I'm also an author, a lapsed author, but I've been through the process on the other side as well. And I've done just about every job in a publishing house. I joke that I've little red-henned it through the industry, sometimes white knuckling, including editing, bookkeeping, acquisitions, typesetting, sales, shipping, packing boxes, packing skids. It's pretty much ruined me for just about any other job I could have. I've realized just from the sheer variety of work, I have not been bored in well over a decade, which to me is a good thing. And if you're thinking of going into publishing, I hope that you are not bored either. So I got into the industry through a temp agency. I'd done an undergrad and an MFA, and I'd worked for a few years in nonprofit healthcare before switching careers. So I come from that career switching background. And honestly, I wish that I had taken this course or this certificate. It would have helped me a lot with kind of the baseline level of knowledge that it would have made my job a lot easier from day one. Let me just say that. And so a lot of my previous job experience was transferable into my publishing role. I think you're most successful if you have a well-rounded skill set. That's a tongue twister. And you'll learn tons of skills in this program that, you can, and you'll learn the industry inside and out. And so I really do think it's super valuable in terms of setting expectations, and that this is the kind of place where you can kind of try out different things. I think that's what makes the certificate really unique, is that there is such a strong focus on editorial, which isn't necessarily the case in other programs. And I don't know, you kind of get a really good sense of what there is and what the industry has on offer.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Lee, and sharing an all-rounded perspective from the industry as well. Finally, I'm very pleased to introduce Julia Harmsworth. Julia is both a student in the certificate and currently serves as managing editorial coordinator at HarperCollins Publishers. Welcome, Julia.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Julia. I'm here to talk a bit about my experience in the program and what I do now. I'm currently a managing editorial coordinator at Harlequin here in Toronto, which falls under the broader HarperCollins umbrella. I've been there for about 2 years, which is crazy, but 1 year was as an intern, and I'm just now wrapping up my first full year as like a real permanent staff member, which is pretty cool. And I work in managing editorial, which is the kind of in-between liaison department between editorial and production. So we run status meetings, we manage schedules, we make sure that every single book gets to the printer on time. And I'm also the editor's point of contact if they need pretty much anything. So it's a lot of problem solving and anticipating problems, which I think is really fun and interesting. I started the publishing program in the fall of 2023. I had just graduated from my undergrad in English in the spring, and I knew I wanted to work in publishing. I'd like known that for a long time, but I was really struggling to make any headway to I was applying to every job you could ever see on the face of the earth. I was getting no traction. I was feeling pretty bummed out. So I did some LinkedIn stalking, and I was like, okay, like what does everyone who has a job that I want, what did they do first? How did they get it? And I realized that so many people had taken this certificate program. And I was like, oh, I didn't know this was a thing. I should probably do this. So I signed up. I started in the fall. And once I kind of had taken a few courses and had it on my resume, I started getting a lot more traction with jobs, which was really exciting. So I really quickly landed an interview for Harlequin and got my internship the following January, so just a couple months after I started in the program. And then I was able to continue working on the program while I did my internship. So you can totally do this while working full time, which is really nice. It took me about a year and a half or 3 terms to complete it. And I wrapped it up right before I started my full-time role at Harlequin at the end of last year. I thought the program was really, really great overall. I really did learn a lot that I use in my job every day. Like especially when I was an intern, people would explain things to me that they thought I didn't know, and I would be like, "No, I actually do know what this is because I learned it in my publishing certificate." Especially the lingo, like there are so many fun acronyms and weird terms that we use in publishing that I had learned, and so it was just kind of it made the learning curve less steep, and the transition a lot easier for me, which I appreciated. And I'd really encourage you, if you do take this program, to take courses in as varied disciplines as you can. That's what another thing I really appreciated about it is that I thought I wanted to be an editor, but then I was introduced to all these other disciplines I didn't know much about. And I just thought that was really cool and gave me a really good perspective. You might kind of decide that you're interested in something that you didn't even know about before. And I'd also really recommend the production courses, the Brights course with Kelvin and the audiobooks course. I thought they're all really interesting, really like packed full with good content and really helpful. And that's my spiel. Happy to chat with anyone or answer anyone's questions.
Great. No, thank you so much, Julia, for sharing that student's perspective with us. Really provides us a lens into, what that looks like, and then, your journey from that to internship to now 1 full year. It's really great to hear. It's experiences like that we uh, like to hear and do what we do for. So let's dive right into our Q&A sessions. Everybody, if you can put in any other questions that you have. The first one is about, I'll go ahead with the first one. It's about internship. If there's an internship built into the program, or you provide guidance and connections for students who want to pursue any internships with publishing, if there's any practical experience or portfolio pieces. And I think we had that question later on as well, if there's opportunities to connect with people in the industry through the program or any internships. So if we can, maybe Kelvin, you can start on that, and then Lee can
Yeah.
go in.
Uh, because we're a part-time program, we don't have an internship built into as a condition for graduation, because that would mean that we'd because it would mean that we would be able to be as flexible as we can with for the program. That said, we do share internships and job opportunities for students who are enrolled in publishing courses. Once you enroll in courses and once the term starts, you'll be added to a online community with your other classmates and other program mates it'll be basically a community. I guess an LMS or learning management system that is just for publishing students. And what you'll find there are job postings and internship opportunities that we are told about it. Yeah, in terms of portfolio pieces, you do not have a portfolio piece, but as Julia said, the very act of taking the courses and finishing alone will make you stand out to employers better. And having your publishing certificate is certainly a huge help towards applying for jobs in publishing.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, so next one is with what's the career outlook for someone with a business background coming into this program rather than having some background in publishing already? Yeah, so maybe both of you can touch a little bit on that.
Who should take it? Me or Lee?
Lee can start. Why
I
don't
could
you?
start.
Yeah, and then you can join in.
Um, I think having a business background would be a huge advantage. The thing about publishing is that there's lots of moving parts. We're selling B2B to bookstores. We're selling, direct to consumer. And having knowledge of both of those ways of reaching consumers is super helpful. There's so much data to analyze. Oh, I can't even, I can't even begin. In terms of sales data, in terms of metadata, so that's all the data that underpins how books show up online on the internet and appear in bookstores. So being able, like having a bit of a background where you're comfortable handling lots of data, where you're comfortable handling, like looking at inventory, all these kinds of things. I think it would be a huge asset.
Yeah.
Kelvin, before you add yours, we also have someone who's coming in from a science background as well. So
Yeah, I
just
was just
add.
about to say, I do get a lot of questions like this where people will come in and say, I don't have an English degree. I come from science or business or accounting or anything else. Am I going to do well in this program? And usually, the main answer is yes, you will do well. And we welcome, and I think the publishing industry does stand to benefit from a diverse range of backgrounds because, a whole bunch of English majors is going to make the industry very homogenous. And I speak as a English and philosophy major. So I think, and the thing is, if you come with a different background, for example, we have one of our instructors comes from a science background and she became a freelance editor. So her specialty was scientific publications. So she really built that niche for herself and is doing quite well with it. So yeah, come in with a different backgrounds are great. And you're one of the persons who asked the questions, having a business background. Yes, it's great because publishing is a business and we can, and I think your business acumen and skills will stand you in very good stead.
Sweet. Okay, so moving on to the next one. We've got a few questions coming in, so I want to get to as many of them as possible. Navneet is asking, what's your advice for those who want to enter this industry or break into it, How do we stand out? And we also have another anonymous question about, what's your advice for people looking to pivot into this career and, match their current skills with industry roles? So, maybe we can answer those two together and a little bit from everybody.
Take our courses.
The soft
Sorry,
sell.
Great
that was a
advice.
joke. That was subtle. Okay, I mean, like the thing is, when you get into this part, it's a competitive industry, so you do want to have, you do want to, you know, make sure you stand out. So that is the right question, but the question is how to approach that. Our program is an online program. We're online only. Like I'll admit, you won't get that same face-to-face time with your classmates and your instructors as you would in the past. But most of the other schools are like that as well. It's online only. So I would say these things. I would say go to things, go to events. Well, first of all, social media. Um, Follow publishers, follow publishing people. Don't be too nakedly transparent about the fact that you're coming in to try to find a job, but talk to them. Publishing people have interests just like you, and chances are they will have interests that you share, and they will talk about it. So talk about that with them, and chances are, you'll get people opening up to you. And you'll be more familiar if you ever meet them in person. So that's one thing. Follow publishers. They will tell you about events that you can go to, or find reading series, go to those things. Basically, what I'm saying is get into the community. If you have volunteer opportunities for awards or readings or literary journals, go do those. If you have an opportunity to, or if you already do work in a bookstore, that also is very good for your resume, because publishers love seeing people with book selling experience apply for their jobs, because working in a bookstore touches upon so many of the other departments in a publishing house from the other side. So you already are familiar with what's going on, but also it shows that you are aware of what market trends are and what's selling and what's not. And that's always very valuable to publishers who may sometimes be, in a silo of their own in terms of publishing books. I think that's what I have for you. Basically, go to, be part of the community, go to things, volunteer. Just, it's like I mean, it's the same advice I would have given you if we were taking courses in person. So that doesn't change.
I would add that also in lots of cases, not every case, but in lots of cases, it's fairly easy to move in different jobs in the industry. It's not like if you set out as an editor, you are just an editor, or if you are doing a marketing, you're just in marketing. And that part of it is trying out different things to see what fits for you, like what works for you on the job level too, and thinking about the differences between working for a multinational company, a big publishing company, versus an independent publishing company, which is really like a all hands on deck small business. It's like just to echo what Kelvin said about really knowing the people that you're approaching and the people that you're talking to. Be familiar with what the kinds of books publishers are publishing. That kind of thing goes a really long way on a resume if you can show familiarity.
Yeah. If you are lucky enough to get an interview, I should have said that. Don't say lucky me. If you get an interview, when you get an interview, sorry, when you get an interview, they will ask you, what are you reading? So be prepared to answer that.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for all that great advice coming from the both of you. I think that's great. Now let's move on to, I think we have one question for Julia, so we'll just go to Julia for that. And welcome back.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. You're great. So the question is, thank you for sharing your experience. How was your experience working at your first publishing job? Was it what you expected it to be? And I think someone asked, what was your favorite course from the program? So,
Okay. First, my favorite course from the program is probably the audiobooks course
Not mine.
because I'm sorry, I really loved yours too. But I just thought the audiobooks was fun because audiobooks is the biggest growing part of the industry right now. So I think it's really important to understand them. And I thought the assignments were very applicable to actual audiobook work. And I learned a lot that I think is important to know. So I would say that one. But I did also love the rights course. And like I said before, the production one was fun. After my experience, in my first job, I think honestly, yeah, it was mostly kind of what I was expecting. I work at Harlequin, which has an office downtown Toronto. It's unlike Lee's experience, it's like a very corporate, like huge, and we're owned by HarperCollins, which is the second biggest publisher in the world. Like it's a very huge kind of corporate structure. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. But that works quite well for me. It's very like hierarchical, it's very structured, it's very kind of clear what everyone does. Like everyone is kind of like a cog in a wheel in a way, but I think it works quite well. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. The only thing that was maybe an adjustment is that most, or my company, I know most of them are hybrid. So, of course, like when I was younger in high school and dreaming about my career, that was before COVID. So I wasn't expecting like the hybrid remote environment. And I was coming into like my first real job just a few years after COVID in this new hybrid environment where I had to work a little bit harder to meet people and make them know who I was, which I think is important when you're starting out. You want people to remember you. You want to keep you around. So yeah, you might have to work a little harder than you think at that piece of it. But it was like that internship was a really positive experience for me. I've heard good things about the Penguin Random House Canada internships as well, but those are shorter. They're 6 months. But I've actually heard that those have a bit more of like a structured mentorship aspect, which is cool. Mine was really like they just threw you in the weeds, which I thought was fun, but different experiences are all valuable. So yeah.
No, great. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that and your experiences. It is you're so right. Different experiences are all valuable. Take a little bit from each one of them. So okay, next one is about AI. It's always a hot topic, so I'll dive into that one. Someone's curious about your thoughts on the rising AI in publishing and how or if publishing houses are combating AI in writing and publication. So yeah, whatever your thoughts are on that.
Whoever's asking that, are you from the Association of Canadian Publishers? I'm kidding. I mean, AI is a huge topic in publishing and other stock replies. As you know, trade publishing, which I believe most of you who are are here for, is very much against the use of AI, and I believe there are publisher stances on that as well. And we do address some of it in our courses. But you will also find that educational publishing, which again publishes things like textbooks, have a very different business model. So they view AI differently. And when you take the business of book publishing courses, you'll get to see both sides of it and how the industry is responding to that. The short answer, the short unofficial answer, if someone can stop, hit the stop recording thing for a bit, is no, we don't like AI.
No, we like creative work written by human beings.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a huge topic that we are talking about it, but no, we don't like it. We don't like using it. Educational publishers do. It's affected their cost centers, but they do a very different products from what people in trade publishing do.
I will say in trade publishing, we're using AI behind the scenes in some cases to do sort of the work that, like really manual to speed up manual processes. So on that end, it is being used in the industry, but most publishers now have clauses in their contracts to mitigate the use of AI for creative work.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, so I know there's a couple of questions for Julia about internship, which she is typing in there. So we'll move to some other questions in the interest of time. Our next question is the program worth taking if you are mostly interested in magazine digital publishing and not book publishing?
I'll take that one. Yeah, it's if you're interested in digital publishing, again, we have we have a number of digital publishing courses like 803 and 285, and I think some of the other courses like production and book design will be very useful to you. But if your goal is to, end up in magazines, this is not the program for you. The Centennial Publishing Program would be much more for you.
Sweet. Next one is, are there going to be any courses in music publishing in the future?
I'm probably not. The courses that we design are based on market demand and trends. And as you know, most universities right now are not in the position to develop too many courses right now. So we are being very we are watching, what will work for the most people, for the most students. Which is not to say it's not coming down to, it's not happening down the line, but at the moment there are no plans to do a music publishing course.
Okay. So next question from Karen Robertson. Thank you, Karen, for your question. Is where is the publication industry concentrated in Canada? Are there jobs in cities other than Toronto? Especially interested in Montreal and Ottawa. So yeah, maybe
Um,
you and
I'll
Lee can share a little bit on
take,
that.
take that.
Yeah. Oh, all right. I'll go. Yes. I mean, the bulk of the publishing, the two main centers for the English language publishing industry in Canada are Toronto and Vancouver. Out west, Montreal has a really good, thriving English language publishing scene as well. Though again, that's mostly independent publishers. Most of the multinational publishers, or all of them, I believe, are based in Toronto. Ottawa does have the University of Ottawa as an academic publisher. And I'm not sure if there are any small presses there still, to be honest, but there are publishers kind of spread out across the country. And there are positions that are hybrid as well, oftentimes. Calvin, you have anything to add?
No, I was busy actually typing an answer to a question in the question section. We talked about Montreal publishers already and how knowing French would be a huge asset if you wanted to work in French, in publishing, because mainly French language publishers.
There are
Uh,
English language publishers there
yeah,
too.
but not many, like I think three or
Yeah.
four, right? Or more.
No, there's more. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there is okay, what's the Quebec English language publishers
The AELQ or AELQ, ALAC,
yeah, that's it.
the Association of English Language Publishers of Quebec.
Yeah, so
That's an acronym for all of you.
yeah, there are enough of them to go do that, for them to have an association. So yes, there are publishers in Montreal. But like Lee said, they're all like it is centered in it is centered in Toronto because we are the center of the universe. Ah, good. But there are publishers in every province,
Awesome. Thank
but
you.
not as
And,
concentrated as Toronto or
right.
BC. But
Yeah.
still, if you're in Calgary, you'll find Freehand, and New West is there as well.
Yeah.
If you are in Manitoba, you'll find At Bay Press. If you're in like Nova Scotia, you'll find oh god, I can't remember. If you're in New Brunswick, you'll find Gasbro, um,
Goose Lane.
Goose
There's
Lane. Yeah,
Breakwater out in Newfoundland. They're great.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are publishers everywhere.
All over.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's great. But more concentrated here.
Yeah,
So
Nimbus. Woo.
yes. Yeah, I believe the Literary Press Group has a map of independent publishers across Canada.
cool.
That's the associations, like Kevin, Calvin, the
Oh
Association of Canadian
no.
Publishers,
No,
and the Literary Press Group. They're great places to find out about
yeah.
independent publishing.
It was an ACP thing and not an LPG thing. That's as big a faux pas as calling me Kevin.
No, 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 they're not, but you should look at both.
Yes. So yeah.
Okay, so next question, just moving along in the interest of time, and yeah, great call up there on Nimbus. Are the editing courses in the program a helpful tool for doing the Editors Canada Professional Editing Certifications, and how effective is having the qualifications from Editors Canada and finding a job in editorial? I don't know if we can, how much we can speak on that, but maybe in the first part we can touch that. And I know we are just a minute left, but if we can, I don't know if
I
everyone's
can stay
okay
for
with
a bit.
staying a couple of more
I can
minutes.
stay. Yeah.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah, I can tell you that, our courses will be a helpful tool for the certification, and a number of our editors are actually involved with Editors Canada. So, if you take their courses, you will be able to also talk to them about the certification. In terms of having an Editors Canada certification and finding an editorial job, I believe, and Julia and Lee could stop me on this or correct me on this, but I believe that it's not as necessary for working in-house at a publisher. Editors Canada certifications are more for more specialized editing. So, say if you wanted to be certified in indexing, which I don't think it's really Editors Canada. I think it's Indexers Canada who do the certification for that. Or, if you wanted to be certified in something like scientific editing or plain language, there are other, I think those are for more for freelancers to basically tell organizations, I'm a specialist in this, I can do the job. But in terms of, but generally speaking, in-house, most people don't really look for, certification. It'll help, but yeah.
Someone who has an undergrad in publishing from GCM, wondering if this is worth taking if it goes into more depth. And then I think we also had a question from someone asking if you just take a couple of courses, just two or three, do you
Yeah.
get like an idea or a foundational basis? And I think the answer to that is yes, because we did ask people to just take a couple. But yeah,
If you take a
feel
few
free to
courses, you
elaborate.
will, yeah, if you take a few courses, you'll get a foundational knowledge of the industry, and it can help. But I believe, I have to say this because this is what I'm literally hired to do. Taking the entire certificate will be of more help to you in terms of having a knowledge of the industry. But, if you find that if you take two or three courses, get an internship and get a job, that happens too. So, um, and I think and I'm trying to find the other questions because I was going to answer the other one as well, because there's something I wanted to say there. Where is it?
The editing courses?
No, no. Oh, the GCM one.
Yeah.
If you have a background in GCM, I believe GCM is more of an overview, right? I could be wrong, but I need to talk to Rima about what her program's like. But our the publishing certificate program is very much about professional job training. So you are learning skills here and not learning about, the industry, how the industry works or the history of books and whatnot. It's more about get editorial skills, learn how to be a sales and marketing professional, be agent scum, that kind of thing. I'm an agent, so I can call myself scum. Just all right, this is being recorded. I'm just gonna still get in trouble. It's amazing. Yeah. And I see there's a final question.
Yeah, there's just one last question. Is this certificate good mainly for Canadian publishing, or is it transferable to other countries? So yeah,
Uh,
answer that, and then maybe we can, after maybe you and Lee can answer that, maybe we can have Julia round us off with the questions that you answered in text. I know a few people asked that, so maybe just speak about that a little bit as well. So yeah, let's start with this one.
Okay, so our program is based in Canada. It's written by Canadians, so there is going to be a lot of Canadian content, and the focus will be on Canadian publishing. But, certain principles of publishing don't change. Copy editing does not change across countries. Some of the nuances do, but how it works doesn't. Production doesn't change. You're still gonna have to send files to a printer. Digital publishing doesn't change because, you're still going to be working in InDesign and doing a, digital first workflow, blah, blah, blah. So, the greater principles of publishing doesn't change, and you can actually certainly, yes, apply what you learn here to other territories. That said, the examples, the stories, and learning about certain things like government grants, those will be Canadian.
And
But
market, I would say, and market trends as well, those and those kinds of things, like an overview of the industry landscape will be Canadian focused,
yeah,
but again, those are all transferable skills, I think, in terms of grafting them onto other countries.
yeah,
I do have to hop off. I'm so sorry. I
Thank
have
you
a,
so
This is
much
great.
for joining. Yeah, that's all
but
good. We loved everything that you shared, and thank you again for joining. For
thank
everyone that's
Thank
here, we'll
you.
launch one last quick poll as well. But yeah, go ahead, Julia, and
Yeah.
bye, Lee.
Bye, Lee. Um, okay, so someone asked what professional experience I had prior to my internship. The only other, it depends how you define professional experience, but I'm going to take that as like real adult jobs after university. I only had one, and it was a 6 month internship. I worked at, just after graduating, I worked at a nonprofit organization, specifically on their magazine, like on the editorial side. So, like writing content and editing content and like layout kind of stuff, which was pretty applicable. And then while I was in university, I had a really pretty large role on my university newspaper, and I like worked on that throughout my time in undergrad. So that taught me how to copy edit, how to proofread, how to problem solve, lots of good stuff that's really applicable. But the job I have now is actually like my first real permanent for real adult job. So you don't need professional experience to break into the industry. Um, and someone else asked for advice on landing an internship at a publishing company. Um, I really empathize with you. It's really hard. It's really competitive. All you can do is try to stand out in whatever way you can. Like I do think signing up for this program is like the best way to stand out. That's why I did it, and it worked for me. Um, very few people in my generation who I know working at my company don't have a publishing certificate under their belt. It's just kind of hard to get a job over someone who has it. Um, and it also like having it really shows, I think, that
Yeah.
you're really dedicated to the industry, and like you're willing to put in the work and you really want to be there, and you're not just like applying to it like any other job. So I do think it really helps. But other ways to say that would be like highlighting any applicable experience you have. If you have like previous jobs in like communications and journalism, or like any other kind of publishing, like that is really helpful.
Book selling.
Book, oh yeah, book selling. If I wish I had previously worked at Indigo, I tried in high school. But yeah, if you've done that, like that's
Yeah.
really helpful. And I'd also say like if you can communicate an understanding of publishing as a business, not just as a personal interest, like if you can show in your cover letter that you understand the publisher's list and
Yeah.
strategy and what they're trying to do, and you understand that we're here to sell books and that you
Yeah.
understand commercial trends, not just that you like to read literary fiction, that
Oh,
goes a long way. Sorry, it's true. I love literary fiction, but you gotta
my
like
God.
it's a business, you know.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
And
hiring managers definitely look for that.
I'm gonna add to what Julia said as well in terms of for those of you who will enter the program, who will look for internships and jobs, two things, like Julia said and like Lee said before, research and knowledge of what you're going into and the company that you're going into is important. So for example, know the publisher you work for, so know their books, know their lists. So for example, if you're going to for an internship at a publisher whose author won a major award, maybe have read the book and talk about it, or mention that, or mention why you like the publisher, why you like what they do, because it shows them, okay, this person actually wants to be here, as opposed to just they're just randomly scattershot applying, which does happen as well, which I don't encourage, but sometimes it's necessary. But you need to tailor your application and show them why you're sincere. Also, two things never to say on a cover letter or interview: I really love books. That's why I got into publishing. No, we all love books, so don't ever say that. And number two, I edited essays in high school and university for my friends. Yeah, that's not real editorial experience, so don't bring that up. If you worked at a literary journal in university, bring that up. But if you said I edited my friends' essays, don't bring that up. So those are my tips for that I'm giving you for free. You don't have to take a course to know these two things. Consider this a value add for coming to this session. But yeah, but I think it's really important that you show that you want to be there and you know what they are doing, and that you can be part of it. Because a posting, someone once said, I believe it's a chief operating officer of Random House Canada, Random House said, like approach an internship posting or a job posting like it's a problem. You are the solution.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you all for staying. longer, way over time for our attendees. Thank you to our speakers. I just want to say thanks for joining. And in closing, if you're interested in the website, please visit our if you're interested in the certificate, please visit our website at continuing.torontomu.ca and email me at mash.choudhury@torontomu.ca. All the information to contact us and a recording of this presentation will be sent to you within 24 to 48 hours. On behalf of the Chang School, our speakers, thank you all for joining us today and have a great rest of the day.